Now you have another partner. Tell me about your other big partner in this thing.
Yeah, Kelly Korshak, co-founder. He's the muscle behind the machine, no doubt about it. When I met Kelly back in 2016, and he started telling me about the way institutions invest and the way billionaires invest their money, it was very different than everything I'd ever learned or known about investing. I'm either going to do it myself or I'm going to just give it to a professional advisor. That was
Yeah.
my only options. That's not how, like we talked earlier, that's not how the institutions do it. They can, in fact, time the market. Couple of myths that Kelly debunked right away. He said, Randy, number one, people think that diversification in the funds is the way in which you reduce risk. Not true at all. In fact, the more diversified you are, the more like buy and hold of the whole thing you behave, which again takes you right back to the risk. So I'm like, well, how do we avoid that, Kelly? He goes, well, you put some algorithms on things and you did some statistical mathematics. Now, his background is pretty impressive. I brag about him all the time. If he was on this show right now, he would turn bright red and be mad at me later. He went to Stanford's physics program at the age of 16. He graduated with those degrees, but also degrees in statistics, mathematics, and finance. Went to graduate school at the University of Chicago, came out as a quant, and worked on Wall Street for 30 years, managing money for guess what? Institutions. When he was at Deutsche Bank, they handed him $6 billion of the bank's private money to manage. You think they give that kind of money to just anybody? They don't. So when we talk about Kelly, he sees the world very differently. He sees it in mathematics, and he understands the markets. And what he wanted to build, what he said to me was, let's build a tool that we can empower everyone to invest like the institutions do. And that's what we
Well,
built.
and yeah, and by the way, I know Kelly. I think he's one of the nicest gentlemen in the world. Honest, everything about the guy I just love, because he'll tell you straight whether thing's a great idea or a bad idea, just about on anything, and probably even about sports. I've never talked to him about that, but always about money. And I always watch him take care of people, which is kind of interesting. Now, you talk about taking care of people. What kind of horror stories have you seen with people's money when they come in and their portfolios that they might have with some of these folks hundreds of millions of dollars, and some people maybe just tens of thousands of dollars? Do you see some horror stories from time to time?
Yeah, it's interesting, especially this last year, and they're all correlated. People from 30, 40 million on their platforms at big name institutions and traditional buy and hold strategies, right down to your 401ks, right down to the person who is trying to do it themselves. They go set themselves up a little account over at, Betterment or one of the institution places that are less expensive. And they all operate under the same mechanism. It's, back in the 80s, you probably rented a movie at Blockbuster, but you also probably rented a movie at all kinds of other video stores that weren't named Blockbuster. Well, that's like the markets today. That's the institution world today. And so these horror stories, like we know one person we moved, he lost 46%. This is someone with private banking at an institution that had over $10 million. 46% in one calendar year gone. Why? Because they were buying and holding. They didn't bother to try and get out. That same person on our platform would have lost not 46%, they'd have lost 2 in the same thing.
Wow.
That's a
You,
horror
you,
story.
you hear this thing about you. Let's get back to this buying and holding, because I think this is kind of an interesting thing. Because if I know banks, they're taking their money every day and moving it around, and they even sweep accounts. They'll sweep the accounts at night, invest
Yep.
it overnight into a foreign money market account or money, some type of money account of some kind. I don't know all the terms. You know those better than I do. But they're always constantly moving and shifting and doing this. They're not holding that stuff. They're not saying, hey, keep it in my savings account and let's hope that we make some money. I mean, they're moving things around every minute of the day, right? Looking at the
Yep.
screen, doing all that stuff. But you do it a little bit differently. You built the programs that not just know those things, but learn those things, right?
Correct. So we don't sweep accounts, but what we do is the money may be in cash, may not be. So in our case, it would be like what you think a savings account would be, but the difference is this. Think of it as a starting block. So you put your money into a smartfolio. It could have anywhere from 2 to 15 different stocks inside of each smartfolio. And maybe half of them are invested, half of them are in cash. Each of them, though, has its own AI on it. So that AI, every day when the market closes, takes in all the new data. What's the yield curve doing? What are interest rates? What's how much cash is in the, credit card debt? How many people didn't pay their mortgages? All of that data gets pumped into the AI. The AI then takes it, processes it, does its little thing, and then determines again the next day whether you should own that stock or should not own that stock. Either way, when you have that smart folio, it's acting like its own little mini bank. Every day it's looking at what to buy, not to buy, not buy, not buy. And cash is okay. It's okay to be in cash. People always say this, Jeff. I get this the most. But I've always been told, if I'm going to make money, my money must be invested. The thing we want people to change the way they think is cash is an investment. Because if you were going to put it in Apple, and Apple went down $1 today, and you had 100 shares, guess what? You lost $100. So you lost money. Would you have rather kept that money in cash and then tomorrow buy Apple when it's $1 cheaper? That's the mentality I want people to think of.
So it's kind of like you're watching and you've got my money and you see or learn, at least the machine does, let's call it the machine, the Kelly machine that he's built. He sees that it's about to go down. So you pull my money out, and then when it sees it's about to go up again, based on what it's learned, it puts it back in really quick. So in, out, and then, or hold, maybe even hold it for a little bit while they're waiting for that done. And so if I look at a stock chart, and or I look at a year's performance on a stock or 5 years, it's like this, right? Exactly. We're both doing that. So for those that are listening on the podcast, we're going up, it's going down, it's going up, it's going down. And hopefully over a period of time, that trend line is going up from left to right, from the bottom left corner to the top right corner. But this basically, what you're telling me is it eliminates those peaks and valleys and keeps it on that trend line, right?
The idea is to create a smooth left to right, bottom to top line. Smooth it out. Smooth out the ride. Kelly says that all the time. What the AI does is it smooths out the journey. Even if you would have ended up at the same spot in 30 years, who wants to have the palpitations that come with a 30% loss, right?
Yeah.
And if you're doing it right, you're buying at the bottoms, not maybe the very bottom. You might get a little off the bottom, but you're not going to be in the market while it's at the bottom. That's the big differentiator. So it's not doing this, Jeff. It's doing this.
So it's going straight from left to right, bottom left to the top right, instead of going up and down. We're on a podcast for the most part, as well as a TV show. So I want to make sure that everybody can understand exactly what we're drawing on the board. So what's the biggest takeaway that you've learned so far in the model that you're doing?
I'm going to step off of the performance and risk management for 1 second. And the biggest takeaway actually has come in the way we charge people. We don't make a great big deal about it, but we're a SaaS company, simple, transparent fee once a month. That's it. No trade fees, no commission fees. You see lots of this stuff going on, but people don't truly like to buy stuff nowadays. The modern investor, the younger generations, especially as we get into the millennials and the Zs, they don't like to pay for anything if they don't know what they're paying for. And if they don't understand it, they just won't do it. So one big takeaway, big surprise and learning is that transparency in the way you charge is critical. It's even more critical than how much you charge. They'll be happy to pay as long as they know what they're paying for. So that's number one. And my other biggest takeaway is I've been out speaking all over the world, literally, as you know, Jeff, that people truly don't understand how money works. They really don't. They have a general faith that they've just given these people, someone, their money to manage it, and that it's going to go up. That's all they think about. Now, on the bright side, the market goes up 85% of the time. It's that other 15% that causes you massive setbacks. Because they're often, I think 9 times in the last 40 years, we've had 50% corrections. Now, if you're in your 50s or older and you have a 50% correction, you just added 10 years to your work life. And people don't even realize that there's no correlation to how that money works. So those are the two biggest takeaways I've got from the rollout as we've really started cooking here.
So we talk about the takeaways. Let me ask you, what's been the biggest surprises for you in this model?
From a surprise standpoint, it's I'll go both ends of the spectrum. The surprise is how wary and paranoid people are with $10,000 and how loosey-goosey people are with 10 million. It's shocking to me as I have these conversations. I see people throwing millions of dollars around like it's bubblegum money. And I see people holding on to 10 grand like it's the end of the world. And across the whole spectrum. And it is shocking to me to observe that behavior.
You know, I can tell you, I used to see that when I was the CMO of Kodak. You know, somebody would come to me and say, well, Jeff, we ran a $17 billion marketing budget. And somebody would come to me and say, well, it's only 2 million. And I was like, dude, what are you talking about? $2 million? Are you kidding me? $2 million is $2 million. Well, that's a lot of money. And, and I would treat 20,000 like it was 2 million. I just added zero, took a zero away, or a couple zeros in that case. And say, hey, is it a good decision at 20,000? Well, it's a good decision at $2 million. So That's the way I tend to look at it. Let me ask you, Randy, I go back to your history. You were a marketing executive, one of the key C-suite executives at Infusionsoft, and you led marketing. And now you're a CEO of a fast-growing, tech company, SaaS company in the financial markets. What's been the biggest thing for you in terms of making that transition from, just marketing to now, not just marketing, you're the boss of everything?
Yeah, it's been a multiple transition process from a high school teacher, football wrestling coach, to realizing after 9 years, no money there. So I started my own company, and I started my own company from the perspective of there's a problem. And I've learned over all these times that if you can find a problem that a lot of people are having and then attach an easy button to it, you can absolutely have success quickly. So I had that first company for 5 years, sold it to a publicly traded company. Then I started a second company teaching people how to do that. Small business owners, creating education, learning. Basically, Infusionsoft was one of the clients of that company. And then we ended up working for them. And I spent several years there learning the software industry. Yes, sales, marketing, education, training, all that stuff comes along with it. But the biggest surprise that I've learned is that I do have a unique ability to be like, oh, that ain't broke. I'm literally Kelly, my partner, you guys heard me talk about earlier. He gets, every time he starts to explain something to me and he sees me start putting my hands up, he's like, okay, I know, like a third grader. Make it simple, make it simple, make it simple. The biggest thing I've learned, Jeff, and I'll summarize it in this, is if you want to disrupt an industry and truly democratize it, you have to do three things. One, you have to be better than the status quo. You've got to be better. In our case, we beat the market. We're better. You also have to be easier to use. People have to be able to easily consume you. Why do you think Uber took off? Why do you think Netflix took off? Because they were much easier to use. And number three, you got to be less expensive. If I'm less expensive, easier to use, and I outperform the competition, and can disrupt an industry. So we started, and what I learned through all these years is that starting with that end in mind is where you get going from. And that's where we started.
Well, fantastic, Randy. Thanks so much for joining us right here in All Business. It's clear that you're flipping the market, and best success to you. I do need to make sure that we give a disclaimer. I am on the board. I am an investor of iFlip, but I think it's a great tool, and what you're doing is just phenomenal. So congratulations on the success, and I'm looking forward to seeing some more, especially at the next board meeting, okay?
Awesome. Thanks, Jeff.
Thank you. Well, what a great way to wrap up with Randy. And at the end of every show, I like to talk about what I learned. Now, he had three great points that he says you have to do in order to be a very successful entrepreneur. But the one that I like the most is you got to solve problems. In fact, that's what we do all the time, especially when it comes to marketing, is I like to ask, what problem am I solving? Or what problem are we solving as a company? And if you can get to that, That's how you're going to be real successful. And it also gets you to what you want to do faster than ever before. So concentrate on that. What problem am I solving? What problem are we solving? And you'll be very successful, not only in your job, but with your business too. So that's what I learned right here on All Business with Jeffrey Hayzlett. Don't forget to make sure you tell your friends to listen in on our podcast, wherever you listen to podcasts, or watch us on C-Suite TV and listen to us on C-Suite Radio.